Good evening and welcome to Creative Conversations, where we talk to actors, authors, playwrights, cinematographers about their careers and craft. My guest tonight is my friend and a wonderful actor, Seamus Dever. Welcome.
Thank
you.
you.
Doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. You made it in the nick of time.
I did. I had to make sure that I sent you a good picture for your very professionally run show.
It's fantastic. Yeah, very professionally run.
No, I'm super impressed. This is amazing. You got like a switcher. You got theme music. This is great.
Awesome. Yeah, I spent like 40 minutes working on this. So welcome. And one of the first things I like to ask folks, well, first, let me tell people a little bit about you. I'm sure most of the people who've joined in know a little bit, but you studied at the Moscow Arts Theater and went straight from that into 8 years as Detective Brian on Castle. Nothing in between.
Nothing.
No
struggles at all. Just
none.
Handed to me. Oh,
yeah.
Such an easy life. The life of Riley. You know?
That's what it's like for all of us actors.
Yeah, they don't tell you that, but it's sort of just you show up and they hand you parts.
No, but one of the tell me a little bit about your origin story. What was it? At what point in your life did you say, "Hey, this is something that I want to do"? Was it 5 years old?
So I started acting when I was 6. I started doing plays whenever they needed kid actors at the local high school. That was sort of my origin, where it was sort of like, all right, get them up on stage. We need orphans up there to play some of the kids in Oliver or Annie or those sorts of things. So whenever they needed that, like children, Cat on a Hot Tin Roof was actually the first play I ever did. I played Buster, one of the children of Goopa and May. And
that's a shame, because I really wanted to see a 9-year-old brick.
My brick would have been amazing. I wouldn't have understood a thing about mendacity as a child, and like, what are they talking about? Is he gay or not? I'm like, what is gay? I'm only 6. I don't know these things. But alas, I got to have a cap gun and got to run into the scene and go bang, 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 bang with the cap gun. And like, you're just mad because you can't have babies, I think is what I said, which I didn't understand either. I didn't understand the purpose of that line either till many decades later. But that was sort of my first taste, is getting into plays at the local high school. And then when professional shows would come through in the town where I grew up, there was many casinos across the river, and occasionally they would dabble in the legitimate theater at the casinos, to limited success, but I benefited from the experience. So I'm glad they at least tried. So starting to do professional theater, equity theater there, and getting to have those experiences, and it's a weird thing. I mean, I don't know, Matthew, do you have the same experience where you sort of like, you did it for a while, you're like, this is really fun, and you could see yourself doing other things, but you really sort of said, well, I'll just keep doing this and see where this goes. And I don't know, that was kind of my experience. At a certain point I had to choose in college. And so I chose to keep trying and doing the theater, and luckily enough, knock on wood, I've never had to stop. I was really I enjoyed it. There's nothing else in the world I enjoyed more than being on stage, and so I just kept doing it. And fortunately, I made a career of it.
You chose wisely.
Oh, thank you. Sometimes it doesn't feel like I did, as you can probably attest to. Like, what am I doing with my life?
Well, you asked. I did go a different direction for a while.
Yeah. You were an attorney.
I was an attorney. I started working like you. I started acting. My first professional job was when I was 8, and in a short film, and got my union card then, and worked until I went to college, and then for a lot of different reasons, which I'll tell you about some night at 3 o'clock in the morning after a lot of bourbon, I went to law school and practiced law for 5 years and hated it. and then quit after 5 years to come back to this, and have not looked back.
And I'm assuming it, like a lot of things, you were probably very good at it. But
As an attorney?
yeah. But it didn't feed your soul. It didn't feel like you were alive when you were doing it, right? I mean,
I think had I cared more, I think I could have been really, really good at it. I didn't work hard in law school, and my heart was not in it. But I did get onto the moot court board, and I won an award and did a national competition, you know. So when something spurred my interest, I was damn good at it. But I interestingly enough, had coffee with one of my professors about 2 months before this pandemic hit, and we were hanging out. And I said, "Let me ask you something. Did you know back then that I wasn't going to make it?" And he said, "Oh yeah." He said, "I knew you were not going to be practicing law." My buddy Bob Ondrovic, who's actually running for Supreme Court here in New York. So if I lived in New York, I'm only visiting, but if I lived in New York, I would certainly be voting for him because he's a great fellow and will make a fantastic judge. But he has chimed in and said that I was very good as an attorney.
See? But just your heart wasn't in it. That's
my heart was not in it. So you sort of started doing it as a kid and slid into it. What was it then was there something about it that just really attracted you? There's a question that I'm driving towards.
I got you. No, I think there's a lot of times in life where you start a project, and you kind of go, all right, well, you know, someday this will get finished and we'll see it to the end. I do that a lot in my life with a lot of things. You know, you see a project start, finish, and there's nothing as satisfying as the project of creating a play. And I'll focus on theater for this conversation. I mean, it's satisfying in a different way, putting together a film or producing a film and being a part of film and going from beginning to end. But there's something about being in a play that starting off rehearsals and pulling it off and then growing with the role and then finishing it in a different place, especially if it's a good play, that when you finish that, you kind of go, wow, we did that. We created that out of nothing. And nothing is as satisfying as that. It's really hard to describe, but it's really essentially that. It's a wholly satisfying feeling to create a work of art like that.
Because one thing that I found, and what I want to know from you is, you know, the things that are important to me about what we do now are completely different than the things that were important to me 20 years ago.
Yeah. I'm sure.
And do you find that your reasons, what you're looking for in a project, what you carry home with you at the end of the day is different? Oh
yeah. Because I think it's sort of like, you know, you say yes to a lot of stuff when you're younger, and just to get the opportunity to work with certain people or do something different. But you get choosier when you get older. You get pickier. You really don't want to spend your time working on something unless there's money at stake, unless it's a good job. But like the stuff that's just sort of like, hey, we did it, great, and you sort of like, even TV's like that. A lot of the TV that you do, you go, oh, that was a gig, and I did it, and I said the words, and everyone seemed pleased, right? Everyone was very pleased, but you kind of like, that was just a paycheck. That was not really something that I go, wow, I'm really proud of that. Just the level of your choices, realizing that your time is valuable. And yes, you can accomplish all these things, and you know the novelty of that is kind of worn off, and now you sort of say, well, I'd rather do good stuff. I'd rather work on a good script, and do all those things, and maybe I'll just say no to these things until something good comes along. But unless there's money in it, there's always that proviso.
Right. Well, so that leads into the work that you do at Antaeus.
Yeah, my theater company. Yeah, there's a lot of they're good plays that we do at my theater company. It's a small theater, you know, 99 seats, like a lot of typical Los Angeles intimate theater. It's more about the rehearsal that you get, and being on a television show for all those years. as you know, you don't get rehearsal in TV. And so you just barely get to know material. I think you get to know characters very well in television, but as far as material, you barely get to know any of the material, and then it's done. You performed it and it's done. It's like you were at opening night and it was a rehearsal all in one, and you performed it and you did it and you go, that was pretty good, right? And then, you don't know till someone assembles it later if it was any darn good or not. But the idea of rehearsing something, being frustrated with material, not going with the first choice, really getting your hands dirty with material. That's my favorite thing. Right. Rehearsing. I missed rehearsing. And then those are some of the best moments when you have discoveries and the work deepens and your first choices are not necessarily the right choices. And it, it complicates things. And that's when it gets interesting, I think, is in rehearsals. That's what I miss.
Yeah. Yeah. Me too.
Yeah.
You study at the Moscow Art Theater,
Mm-hmm.
which is in Moscow.
Moscow, Russia.
Russia, not Idaho.
No, that's a different Moscow.
It's a different Moscow.
Yeah, different area, different kind of theater. It's sort of less cattle-based theater. Yeah.
Now, was that right out of college that you went there? Or when did you go there?
Yeah, I went there right after undergrad. I studied in undergrad. I finished college in 3 years. I was in a hurry. I don't know why, but I'm kind of glad it all worked out in retrospect. But I finished college, and I knew I needed more education. I felt like I needed a better understanding of how to be an actor. There were a lot of things that I still had questions about, and so I had always been told I had a cousin of mine who was a Broadway actress in the 60s and 70s. Her name was Jean Arnold.
Yeah.
Have we ever talked about this? Yeah, Jean Arnold.
No, we hadn't.
No, Jean was my cousin. She married my first cousin. Okay. Jean was 50, 60 years older than me, but she married into my family.
Okay, so that leads into this question that my friend Bob also asked: that do you come from an acting or theatrical artistic family?
I think from the perspective of being related tangentially to a Broadway actress and being encouraged with her, yes. Right.
Okay.
But also more than that, my father studied theater in college. He was on the technical side with a lot of things. He's a wonderful scenic designer, and he studied in college. I went to Wayne State University in Detroit, which is actually a really good theater school. At some point, he actually received direction from Tyrone Guthrie. Isn't that amazing? Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And so he always wanted to go in that world. He became a teacher. Eventually, he started directing in high school. So he was my high school director for my last 2 years when I was in high school. And so he was always very encouraging of this pursuit. He didn't ever see it. I have the opposite story as most people who, when they told their parents they were going to be an actor, that they disowned them and they say, "Get out of my house! Right. How dare you gypsy! What have we done? We failed as parents." I didn't have that experience. My parents were actually quite happy that I made that choice and encouraged me. Fortunately, it all worked out. But yeah, so there was that side. My dad is very artistic, and I think he would have been a really good director and probably a very good actor. But he decided to stick to more of the scenic arts and the technical arts because he's a really good technical director too. So
right.
So I was always encouraged in that world. But sometime when I was 10 or 11 years old, my cousin Jean realized that I had some interest in the theater. She had seen that I had been doing plays at the local high school, as I told you. And so she started sending me all these books to read. I have a signed copy of Uta Hagen's book from 1987. It was my 11th birthday. Wow. Encouraging me. She had just done Uda's workshop in New York, and she signed a copy for me for my birthday and said,
"You just really depressed me, because you said." 87 for your 11th birthing. Yeah. And I started studying with her in 90 when I was 30. So, I think we need to move on.
Date. Dates. One of these dates. It's age is nothing.
It's nothing. It's meaningless.
It's nothing. It's all about feeling younger, right?
Yeah, right. Okay, good. I feel awesome now.
So yeah, I'll finish that. She started encouraging me. She started sending me books. Like once she sent me books for a book for Christmas and a book for my birthday, and it was always like, "This was a fascinating book. I hope you enjoy this." There was a lot of good things. She would pass things on to me, biographies and other books on acting, and so it became the thing where she was encouraging me, and she was always the one who said, like, when you start applying to schools, you should look into Carnegie Mellon. And so I didn't really choose where I wanted to go for undergrad, but for grad school, I looked into Carnegie Mellon's program. I auditioned for them, and they happened to have a combined program with the Moscow Art Theater, which I didn't know about. I mean, kids these days, they have the ability to research we saw a magazine where, like, Carmel and Moscow Art Theater. Like, I didn't get that issue of, I don't know, whatever, Theater Arts or
Right.
Those trade publications. Like, if you didn't get that, if you lived out in the middle of nowhere like I did in Arizona, you didn't see any of that. So
Right.
I wasn't aware. So I show up to the audition. I'm auditioning for Carnegie Mellon, and there's a Russian guy there, a gentleman by the name of Sasha Popov, and he's like, "So yes, this is a program with the Moscow Art Theater, and you will be going to Moscow if you are accepted." And I'm sitting there in San Francisco in the audition room, going, "Oh, this is a much bigger deal than I thought it was." And I was really young at the time, and quite lucky that they accepted me into the program. But it all worked out for what it is, because my teachers were all everything aligned in my universe, and I'm quite glad I made the decisions I made, because I got some wonderful teachers that I probably wouldn't have gotten anywhere else. So yeah. From at school, I had a nice combination of English teachers. For some reason, all of my Carnegie Mellon teachers were English. So things like, acting technique, things like voice and speech were all from the British side. And then everything else, movement and Stanislavski was from the Russian side. So I had an interesting juxtaposition that really forced myself as a young person to sort of say, they're saying one thing and they're saying the other. How do I reconcile these things in my little tiny actor mind? How do I take all these things into account? So some wonderful stimuli from those two different worlds. I'm very lucky that I had that.
That's great. So Stanislavski, you were intensely immersed in Stanislavski there in Moscow, for where he lived and worked, obviously. For how long? It's a year-long program there?
It was a year long. I was only in Moscow for 6 months, the last semester of our school, because we had to go there. We did a show in Rep. We did 2 shows in Rep. We brought a show over from the U.S. We opened it in Pittsburgh, and then we went to Moscow. And so we're doing 2 shows in Rep, and then we had the ability to see any theater in Moscow for free. So we went and saw all these plays in Russian and all these famous, places. Of course, the Moscow Art Theater, but the things like the Sovremenye Theater and the Mali Theater. You were getting to see all these different things coming in here, and Moscow really is the theater capital of the world. New York is nothing like Moscow. I mean, I'm sorry if you think New York is the theater capital of the world, but you should really go to Moscow, especially during the Chekhov Festival in the spring, because you're getting all this theater coming in from all around the world. And theater in Russia is treated very differently. Most plays are like 3 hours long. The way they build sets in Moscow is like for a Broadway stage. I mean, they're gigantic sets, and they move, and there's scene changes and everything. It's not just like, hey, this is a living room set. We're gonna be here for the entirety of the play, and it's really very impressive. And they do shows in Rep. If you're in a theater company, like the Moscow Art Theater has like 33 shows in Rep, and they don't do put-ins, by the way. So they do a changeover every night. Wow. If you're in a production of Three Sisters, you will probably only come up into rotation of Three Sisters once every month and a half. So no put-in rehearsals, no refresher rehearsals. It's like you're treated as a professional. And you might do that play, that straight play, not a musical. You might do that production of Three Sisters for 10 years. before they restage it and completely scrap it. That's
Wow.
what regular legitimate theater is like. Not the musical theater, the regular legitimate theater. The plays will age, and they'll go on and on and on and on, and they'll just be in rep, and that's the way it's put in. And it's like that for the entirety of their season, not just for 3 months like it would be at like a Shakespeare festival or something. It's quite amazing. It's quite intricate, and that's why I say it's the theater capital of the world. Go and visit, and you'll be very impressed. You can see a different play. You can sit there for a month and see a different play every night. It's crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
So again, my friend who's going to be a judge seems to have a lot of questions. These judges.
About Russia.
Yeah, they've got a lot of
These
questions.
judges are very inquisitive.
Yeah. He wants to know, how are Moscow audiences compared to Broadway audiences?
Well, there tends to be a large. It can be very intimidating because you'll sit there at a play in Moscow, and everyone will have their arms crossed, and they'll just be staring and not reacting. You'll find something funny, and you look over and no one's laughing, and you're like, wow, they really hate this play. But the truth is, they're actually just being what they deem as respectful, and they're generally all dressed up because it's still an event to go out to that. So they treat the theater with some respect. But they'll be very quiet and dour, and you're like, wow, they really hated that play. And then at the very end, they will stand up and they will applaud, and there will be applause that goes for a matter of a couple minutes, and then eventually they'll start clapping in unison. And it's this thing, and the audiences and the cast will come out in different bows. They'll come out, bow, exit, new formation, bow, exit, zoom, and so that might go on for another 15 minutes. And meanwhile, you're like, it's like 11:30. We should, it's Tuesday night.
Yeah. And if I'm in the cast, I'm thinking, I'm ready for a drink. I'm done with the bowing.
I'm hungry. This plays 3 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's an event. I mean, it's like an all night thing. There'll be like 2 intermissions for a lot of plays, and the intermissions are never 15 minutes long. They're like 20, 25 minutes. But it's an event. People go to the theater like that, and it's impressive. At first, when you don't know, you think you're just this little quickie kind of theater. Like, we're going to see a little 2-act play. No, my friend, no. You're stuck there for several hours.
So Stanislavski in Moscow, and then you come back to the United States, and you became a member of the Actors Studio.
Yes, I was very fortunate. I had auditioned for the Actors Studio. Gosh, when did I join? Around 2003. I had auditioned, and my audition was terrible, and they wanted me to come back with a different scene, because that's what you do. You audition, and they give you notes, and you might be a finalist, and then hopefully come in and you get to take classes there and everything. And I was like, oh, I'm a little busy. I can't do another scene right now. I'm doing a play. I'm doing I did the LA premiere of A Clockwork Orange at a theater called the Greenway Court Theatre here. And I played the lead role in that. I played Alex in A Clockwork Orange. And they all came and saw all the voting committee, Martin Landau, Barbara Bain. They all came to A Clockwork Orange, and they saw me, and they asked me to join just based on my performance in that, which was quite unusual. I was very lucky that I took that path, that I didn't have to go through the audition process like a lot of people did. And so, yeah, I joined as a member of that. And whenever we're allowed to be in the room again with each other, it's a very interesting place to go and watch people do work.
Yeah, I've spent a lot of time there watching work.
Yes.
I spent a lot of time there watching work.
Yeah. It's a very interesting place. And I'm being kind because I have learned a lot there. It was doing a lot of the sensory exercises there. I was never exposed to that in undergrad. There was no Strasberg influence at all in my undergrad or my grad school, because we did Stanislavski. And so we learned that sensory work and effective memory was only one portion of Stanislavski's psychophysical process.
Right.
One of 3 things, by the way, and equal as important. Strasberg went, we're just going to focus on that one thing.
Okay, talk about the other 2.
The effective emotional memory is one of them.
Right.
And the great worlds of art and literature And observation is the third component. And all the things that you can learn about as an actor. So the purposes are obvious. Emotional memory, it's done to bridge the gap between yourself and a character's experience.
Right.
It's not meant to get you to an emotional place. And unfortunately, it gets used as such. Robert Lewis talked about this in his book, where, you know, even back in the 50s, people were fetishizing the idea of emotional memory, and saying like, well, this is the thing that gets me emotional, so now I'm ready to act. It's like, no, it's supposed to be something like the idea of loss. Like we take if loss is a theme in your play that you're acting in, you're like, okay, what kind of loss is this? Is this a loss of a parent? Is this the loss of a lover, a boyfriend, a girlfriend? What is this loss I'm experiencing? I've never experienced something like that. I haven't lost any of my parents. So how do I bridge that gap?
Right.
And so choosing a bit of a loss. You're not doing the loss for the sake of loss. You're trying to remember how it had an effect on your body. You're trying to remember where that loss was centered in your body. What were the senses? What were all those things that are there? And you use effective memory, emotional memory, as that idea. Observation. How to observe a character that is different than you. Going out in the real world and finding your character. We were forced at every place we went, and we traveled. We started out in Boston in graduate school, and then we moved to Pittsburgh, and then we moved to Moscow. So every place we went, we had to do an observation exercise on somebody there. So it was about going out in the street and observing someone and bringing that person into the classroom, and focusing on things such as tempo, rhythm, focusing on their center of energy in their body, and all these things, and realizing that not every person is the same. So in building a character, you're thinking about the physical presence and how that physical presence, what you can determine about the person on the inside through that physical presence. It's something that I forget to do. I'm not saying I mastered all these things and I always remember, but it's a tool that we have as actors. And Stanislavski very much meant that, is going out there and observing someone, really penetrating and finding the seed of that character, of that person, and bringing their mantle in with you. That was very important.
Let me ask you a question about that, though, because I do an exercise with my students where similar to that, but what I ask them to do after they've found the person who has the behavior that they want to bring into class, I ask them I want them to approach it not by just observing the behavior and bringing it into class, but figure out what is the backstory to that behavior. Why does this woman sitting alone in the coffee shop, every time the door opens, why does she look up hopefully and then tuck her head back down? What's the story behind it? Because if all you're doing is imitating the behavior, then it becomes rote.
Right, exactly. And then it becomes just an imitation. You're sort of like, well, and that's what I meant by penetrating, finding out that, of course, you can sit there and you can write an entire biography, but the idea is also applying prior circumstances, given circumstances, to that person's situation. So then knowing that when they have an impulse, you know, what is the purpose of that impulse? What is the intention, or what is the action of that impulse? The way that they see the world, and their actions, and being able to apply that to a different person. And so then thereby realizing that not all people are the same. I mean, we start with the idea of actors. This starts as myself in the given circumstances, right? But it doesn't stop there. Unfortunately, in film and television, most of the time, it stops there. You're playing yourself. Because that's the behavior you can trust, and people around you for some reason can trust. But acting isn't just supposed to be like that. You're supposed to apply all these other things to it. So observation being a very important thing, and going out there and observing these. The third thing that Stanislavski talked about was the great worlds of art and literature, and using those as an inspiration. When he said that, he meant novels, books, he meant paintings, he meant ballet, he meant opera, he meant every bit of the entirety of the artistic canon of the world that has existed up until this moment, and how you can use that as an actor. And we would go out and we would find paintings, go to art museums, or find paintings in books, and we would do exercises based on those paintings. A lot of people do that, which is It's amazing. It's fun. You look at, all you have is a still image, but the artist has chosen that still image in that moment in time, and the relationship, the proximity of all those characters in the scene to each other, and has chosen that title for a reason. And it's up to you to bring that to life and put some life into that. Why are they looking at each other? What's the story? What happened before? And where does this go afterwards? And so we would do exercises with those, with American paintings, English paintings, Russian paintings, and being able to get into that. So there's a little bit of the visual world that we were looking and finding clues. And I would say the last part is the last component of psychophysical process, which is the strongest of all of them, is imagination. And saying like, okay, we're going to do imagination exercises based on given circumstances, and allow all those things in your areas around you to relate with the given circumstances. So it's very vast, and it's a huge world of in the Stanislavski world. But I feel like, going to Russia, I had a greater understanding of what all those things meant. And you can really only get a little bit of that in the books. I think Stanislavski's books are terrible. I think they're poorly written. I think the ideas are great. I think they're not distilled correctly. I think they're presented poorly. I think the idea of presenting it as a narrative that might have been easier to understand, it was something that was just a little bit like, well, what are we really getting at here? And
what
so
would you recommend? Because other people have not rewritten them, but have re-expressed his ideas. Who would you recommend people read?
I think Robert Lewis is the best, because he combines a lot of what was going on, and he has a very healthy perspective of what is happening, what happened in the United States with the group theater, and then in through the method, and a nice understanding of that. He also went off and taught at Yale, and did good things with their program. I think he was the head of the department there. Anyway, so he had a nice perspective about where acting was coming from and where it is now. His stuff, advice to the players, is probably the best acting book that I've read from a Stanislavski point of view, and being able to understand what he meant by these things. That's my recommendation. I've read a lot of acting books, and everyone takes a little piece of Stanislavski and kind of makes a pet project of it. But as a whole, I think Robert Lewis has a perspective of all of it, and is not a fan of saying that there's only one kind of acting. There's only one kind of modern psychological drama, and that's all the actor should be good at. Understanding that there's all these other genres and all these other things that actors should also be flexible enough to be able to understand. That was his big sort of pet peeve, is that we've become so narrow as actors, and the method only teaches one kind of sliver of acting, and there's so much other acting out of there.
Well, that's one of the things that I like about your work, is because I can tell when I watch your work, and I've seen your television work, and I've seen your work at Antaeus, which I won't say obviously one is better, but they're very different. It's a different kind of work. Mm-hmm. And there are actors that I watch who I say, that person has a method. And then there are actors that I watch and I say, that person has a toolbox. Mm. And I like toolbox actors better than actors with a method, because I feel like you need to look at the material the same way. If you're a handyman, you got to walk up to the job and say, what tools do I need for this job? Mm-hmm. And you don't approach the front page the way you approach the cherry orchard. Right. Or if you do, I don't want to see that production of the front page.
Right. And
I might want to see that production of the cherry orchard.
Yeah. It's, that brings up an interesting point, is the idea of how do you teach genre? How do you teach comedy? And it really does require a lot of people say, they're the same thing. You're all about going after the truth. Well, I think that's only true to a certain extent. I think you have to have an understanding of that something is supposed to be comedy and play with lightness. That's not just something that's going to jump off the page no. or, going to be directed. That really does require the actor to be able to understand that this is a comedy. That doesn't mean that it's faster and louder. That's all you need to worry about, but the actor needs to have the ability to paint with lightness, and things don't stick the same that they do in drama. My master teacher liked to talk about the essence of tragedy is loss, and the essence of comedy is surprise. And so understanding that everything is a shade of that. And when we talk about tragedy being loss, of course, there's different kinds of losses, but it all coming from that and how we relate to that loss. And comedy is a surprise. So is something funny because it's an unusual situation? Is a character funny because they see the world in a different way and they surprise us as an audience and thereby make us laugh? It's very interesting. But so when you're doing comedy, having an awareness of those surprises, as an actor, being aware that lines are supposed to surprise you and supposed to surprise the audience, and that's why they laugh. That's what jokes are things that surprise you. So being aware of those things as well, it's very tricky, and we think that it's all just going to be handed to us, or it's all on the page, or it's all going to be directed in that way. That's not true. You have to have an awareness of where that is going, and the sense of that genre.
We have a question from Tatiana Leach. What is your personal philosophy when getting into character?
It changes from experience to experience, from play to play. Most of the time, I have the ability to get very anxious and nervous. I say anxious, I mean nervous. So most of my getting into character and experience is relaxation. And sort of, I'm going to use this metaphor, tearing down the building before I start up again. So when I enter into a theater, doing some breath exercises, because I know that's going to calm me. Maybe even sitting and meditating for a few minutes, I know that's going to calm me. Maybe doing some yoga type exercises, I know that's going to calm me. Only at that point can I start thinking about the given circumstances of the play. We do this rush thing, and we're really guilty of that in television because we have no time for preparation. You show up, you have to be ready to do it. So you have to figure out a way to prepare physically before you go to work, to put yourself in that mind frame. Otherwise, you're going to be building a house on top of a house that hasn't been knocked over. You're going to be building a house on an old foundation. So you got to rip everything down, start over, relax, find some center for yourself where you can start thinking about things like prior circumstances, things like given circumstances. What are my relationships to the people around me? How long have I known them? Where am I? What time of year is it? What time of day is it? How does that feel in my body? What are my senses feeling right now? Going through all 5 of those senses, and you can start to say, all right, I have a flexibility that I can start now. Okay, now what's my first line? and then you can go from there. But that's really my philosophy in starting out, is that I have to deal with my own nervous situation. Otherwise, I'm probably not going to be able to have fun. I think my philosophy lately, this is a very long answer, but my philosophy lately is remembering that acting is supposed to be fun. Because we get so tied up in getting the job and manipulating and sort of tearing apart the machine of ourselves, breaking it down, saying what's broken. I think sometimes we do forget that this is supposed to be fun. So, and when I say fun, it's not all comedy. It's, there's fun and tragedy too, but where is that fun? And this is supposed to be fun. How can you get yourself back to that, 6-year-old boy who found it fun to be on stage for the first time? Yeah.
I tell people, I say, remember, it's called a play.
Yes.
Play.
In fact, have we talked about this? I don't. The Russians don't have a word of to act. They don't have a verb to act.
Huh.
I think I might have done this in a class with you. The Russian word for act is igrat. The verb is to play. So the same word that the Russians have for gambler is actor. Igrak. Igraki is players.
Huh.
It's the same as gamblers. So the idea of playing is something that they're never completely divorced from. They understand that this is about playing. I think you're along the right path of that. Remembering that this is play, and you have to come to play and enjoy the process. And if you enjoy it, I think the audience is going to enjoy it too. We forget that. Gosh, we forget that so much, and we treat this so seriously. But it's you have to be open to that playing experience. That's good. I like that.
So Moscow Art Theater, lots of theatrical training, and then you find yourself on a TV series for 8 years.
Yes.
And we were all so sorry that happened to you.
I know, it's terrible.
Yeah, terrible fate. And I do have to say, and I'm sure I have said this to you before, but I'm not blowing smoke, because in my family we tend not to. we tend to tell people what we've, like, I have said to people, God, I love your work. What the hell were you doing on that? Or why were you in that? I loved, and this is long before I knew you, loved that show.
Thank you.
But because of the fun that you brought to it, that John brought to it, that what was that other guy who was on it?
Nathan Fillion.
Nathan Fillion, right? That yeah,
I name right.
Yeah, but it was you and John, and then there was that guy Nathan Fillion. But because that is my my wheelhouse, is the tongue-in-cheek mystery. That's the novel that I wrote, and the idea of the writer, and here was a something that had a procedural aspect to it that in my mind solved the what I call the CSI problem, which is, how do you get the characters to dialogue to seem realistic when they're talking about when they're professionals talking about what they do? Because on CSI, they're always saying, well, if we use the luminol, it's like, why are they saying that to each other? They all use the luminol all the time. Yeah. But because they came up with this dynamic of the writer and the cops, it always felt justified to me. And it was just a really well constructed and well executed show. I thought all the time, loved it. But so what, I've done a play for 20 months. And so I know what that struggle is, to do the same exact show for 8 shows a week for 20 months. What is that experience of 8 years, the same character?
Well, a couple of things come to mind. The the idea of, it does feel like you're playing the same scene sometimes, every day, because you're really only using you really are using the same actions. When I say actions, intentions, every day. You're solving, what is the mystery, right? What is the thing that what's the truth? So when you're going, oh, what's the truth, every day, you can kind of get a little stale and get a little lazy about all of it, because you're sort of saying, what does he really mean? Oh, what's he really saying? He must be lying to me. And you feel like you're only using just really one wedge of what you've trained as an actor. It was always great to get emotional stuff in there where things had stakes, because a lot of times you're sort of a third party to everything. I mean, you're a storyteller. Right. So I'm very good at exposition. It turns out that was maybe the reason I was hired.
Well, but you had a wonderful arc in one storyline where you had to go undercover.
Yeah. We worked on that story for a long time. The writer and myself. He did most of the heavy lifting. I threw out ideas, because it was sort of like, all right, I want to really surprise people about where this character's background could be.
And was it the Irish mob that you had to go into?
Yeah. It was sort of hanging out with the Staten Island mob, right. Being undercover with them, and turns out that I had a girlfriend who was in with the Staten Island mob, and I had sort of just left her high and dry, and her life kind of intersected accidentally with my current life. And then there was sort of the idea that I had to go back in there to finish what I started, 10 years prior. Right. And that was fun doing that, because I got to surprise a lot of people with what I did. And I tell you, this is one of the mysteries of me, the mystery of me. No, this is one of the mysteries. People think that I completely changed character in that they're like, oh, I like that character. You know, all I did was I sort of allowed myself stillness and calm, and allowed myself to be never swayed by any situation I was in, completely under control. And it was just a shift on the inside. It was an internal shift. So when people say like, oh, how do you do different characters? Like, I'm never really conscious of that. But knowing that you can just force yourself to be still and force yourself to be under control and not be anxious or nervous by any situation can do a lot for changing of characters. And so people thought I changed my voice and did all these different things. I didn't intentionally do any of that. And I'm not saying this is a miracle, like, wow, I'm just magically a character guy. But I just allowed those shifts to happen. And then for some reason, everyone perceived that I did this drastic shift in character and became an entirely different character. I think the seeds of all our characters are within ourselves, and just realizing that we're being put in a different situation and how to adjust to that. And sometimes the smallest little changes of just saying, okay, I'm going to be completely at ease around everybody. Nobody's going to worry me at all, you know, and people will perceive that, go, oh, that guy's a lot more confident than he was earlier. I don't know where that came from.
Right.
So that happened in that episode. And I still get compliments to this day about my work in that episode, and people remember that one. But I didn't do anything consciously with my voice or any of that. I just allowed some other things to come out of what I naturally already had. Very weird. But yeah, did I answer your question? We started talking about the great machine of television and how it can run over the bones of the most fragile actor. And
I'd give anything to have it run over my bones. Well, you know, my dream in life is to play the coroner now.
Yeah.
I want once a week to say we can tell it was a homicide because of the petechial hemorrhaging. See you next week.
You'd be a good coroner.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll see you all next week.
Next time I hear about a coroner role, I'll be like, oh my God, I got the guy.
Yeah. What was it? I was at a table read once, sitting catty corner to David McCallum at a table read for an NCIS episode, and we didn't have any scenes together, but we were seated next to each other at the table. And when the table reading was over, he turned to me and he said, "It was very nice to meet you. We will never work together unless you are a dead body." And he left.
I think he probably gives that speech every table reading.
Probably everyone, because all of his scenes are with Mark.
Yeah.
He pretty much just does everything with Mark.
But the work in doing, you talk about the CSI problem. The other problem is, there's a lot of procedural shows out there. You realize that these lines are interchangeable with any of the actors that are there. It's just information. It's up to you as an actor to not be so lazy with the material that you choose a point of view about the material. For instance, a typical castle scene was 4 of us, coming into something and a piece of information, the scene will be 2 pages long. I come in with a piece of information to tell, Ryan comes in to tell Castle and Beckett that he found a new piece of information. He just got off the phone with so-and-so, and she says that her husband wasn't there that night, but he did have a weekly poker game that he went to. It's up to me to have an opinion about whether that's bullshit. Can I cuss on this? I can't remember.
You can say anything you want,
but it's up to me to be critical of whether I think that that's bullshit or not. Whether I think she's lying to me, or like, what is my opinion of this? It's not enough to just come in with information. You have to have an opinion about it. And then part of the rehearsal of what we did on Castle, we'd always there'd be my partner would come in with another piece of information. And we'd have conversations about making sure that we all had a different perspective, that we weren't all the same perspective, the same actor who wanted the same thing with that information. It was up to him to decide well, no, I think she's good. And I think she's not lying to me. And these were the conversations that we'd have, so that there was some contrast between us, because otherwise it's just the same words and the same information. There's no character involved in it.
Right.
And that does not necessarily jump off the page. That's up for you as an actor to just go, okay, I can just get away with coming in here and saying the words, but it's going to be better if I have an opinion, if I have a perspective about this, and if we have a little conversation that takes 2 seconds about the opinion. And a lot of our comedy was derived out of that.
Yeah.
Was made sure that we had a different thing, because it was like, if two people are against one person's opinion, he has to all of a sudden back it up. And then you're finding yourself having to persuade people, and that being part of the action. And so there's all these little things that we could do to bring the material. The material was good, but we didn't just want to come in there and just say the words.
No. You and John had a really nice vibe on that show together.
Thank you. And a lot of times, well, thank you. And a lot of times it was sort of falling into the contrast of the two of them. Like, well, this would be your world. You would think of it like this. So therefore I'll be like this. And a lot of the contrast was the source of a lot of the comedy. Two different ways to approach a problem, for instance. So right. Yeah, that was the most rewarding part of it, is realizing that there's still a great deal of art to working on television. Just a lot of times you have to find it, and you can't get lazy with it. It's very easy when you're doing 8 pages a day for 8 years to just sort of come in there like, well, I'm just going to say the words and I'm going to go home. I mean, you and I have certainly worked with enough actors that all that they cared about were just getting the words out of their mouth. And you're like, well, where's the acting?
Yeah. Now, I did have one thing I wanted to ask you about. Which is that I think needs a little explanation, which is this. I do think we need to talk about this a little bit.
That sexy guy. Look at that guy. Yeah. That was an episode of Without a Trace that I did in 2004, I'm going to say. Might have been 2003. Actually, no, it was 2003. Yeah, I remember. That was done in October of 2003. That picture is 17 years old. Look at that handsome, stupid kid. Wow. Addicted to heroin. Look at him, just with the cracked lips and everything. I actually worked with that same makeup designer on MacGyver. And we had some, and he's really good at 3D makeup. So, but yeah, this was an episode of Without a Trace. I played a junkie who was blackmailing a doctor to get prescriptions for meth type products. The doctor was played by Lisa Edelstein, who later on I became friends with, and she guested on Castle. So
and she played my dad's daughter on. Minsky, I think, right?
Yeah. We're all related. It's crazy.
We're all related. She's my sister.
She's your sister.
Sister.
So it's blackmailing your sister, essentially.
You're blackmailing my sister, you bastard.
She's an easy mark. They used that scene actually in a Will Smith movie. Oddly enough, it was like Will Smith's mom or someone's mom was addicted to watching procedural shows. And so I had to sign all this paperwork. What was the name of that movie? It's not important, but it was weird that one showed up later. Tony, what's his name? The Australian actor in that was great fun to work with. I was a dead body on the linoleum, and I had blood on my face, and it was one of those things as an actor, you're sort of like, yeah, playing a dead body. It was maybe my first time playing a dead body in a scene on television.
Yeah.
And so they did the fake makeup, and I was on a dirty linoleum floor for hours.
Oh, wow.
Anthony LaPaglia. That's and Anthony would come over and he saw a shell casing and he picked it up with his pen and he's all, "Hi, mate, how are you?" "Oh, it's Tony. Nice to meet you." And I was just like, "Oh, thanks." And I peeled my face up and yeah. Nice to meet you. It's a real honor working on the show. Big fan of your work. And you're like, it really sucks being a dead body.
But listen, I want to get. We've talked about all this show business stuff. I want to get to something that I really think is more important, which is your wife's travel blog, which is really, I think, what people are tuning in for.
Probably. She's
Dever wherever.
Clever Dever wherever.
Clever Dever wherever.
She's much more interesting than me. And people they go, "Oh, your wife's she's a travel writer. She goes where? How many countries has she been to? She does what? She has tours to Georgia, the state? No, the country. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife's a very interesting person. It's driving her nuts being home.
I would bet. Well, the link to her blog is in the description for this video, so it's up there for everybody to check out. But I wanted to give that a plug, and I also, I like to talk to everybody about what they do, other than what they do, to feed themselves.
Yeah,
I don't mean eating
with spoons and forks. That's not what you're referring to. Okay. Well, then now I'm going to have to come up with a different answer. No, I would say I like working. There's something about working with your hands on projects, on doing things around your house, whether it's fixing something or building something, carpentry, stained glass. I also do. But there's a lot of things that I do that I find as an actor. There's so many things professionally, career-wise, that are out of your control. And this didn't really occur to me, but the idea of taking something very small in front of you, maybe a piece of wood that you're sanding. I recently redid an antique piece of oak furniture, and I stripped it down, and I cleaned it, and I restained it, and I had to match the stain because it was a specific. This is a 100-year-old piece of furniture that I was working on, and I wanted to match the stain to what it used to be. So it had that particular color that looked like it had some age and some oxidization on it. And then I put it back together. I glued it nice and firm. I clamped it, and then I polyurethaned it, and I coated it. It's going to be protected for at least another 40 years at this point. And there was something about just having everything in front of you in your control. This is the only thing I care about right now. All my attention is focused on this little thing that is so refreshing and so different from acting.
Yeah.
It really is. It's like everything's here. This is all I need. Let me just focus on this little square inch right here. Let me fix that. Okay, I bet I can do a little bit more. Let me get this other tool. And there's something about that I find really nice, because there's so much that is out of control, and it can be very frustrating that actually being in control of something and just getting to focus on some micro thing is great. So that's something I like to do. And there's a lot of other house fixes. I have a very old house, and I have another house that's even older. So there's a lot of like upkeep that I have to do with those things. And so a lot of my hobbies are like handyman stuff.
Right.
And learning how to do things. I find that occupies a lot of my time, and maybe keeps me sane. Maybe keeps me fed in some sort of way. I don't know. There's a lot about this pandemic, certainly, that's been very frustrating being an actor, because there's just no work, and there's nothing you really can do. And Zoom readings, I love them. They feed your soul. They really do. Nothing better than not having eye contact with anybody and not knowing where anybody's looking, and doing a 15-person version of the Cherry Orchard. And
I was shooting a web series the other day where the director and producer were on FaceTime, and I had to be cameraman, sound. I had to set up my camera. I had to set up my 3-point lighting. I had to set up my everything. It was a nightmare.
There are some ways that's good. That's good that actors have an appreciation of sound and editing and lighting, and certainly that's something I've always had. I think it would be nice to just focus on the acting, but it's healthy to know all the other aspects, and why something looks and sounds the way it does. But
you're also heavily involved with the Friends Animal Society, is that right?
Best Friends Animal Society. Yeah, I work with a bunch of different animal charities. Best Friends, I haven't worked with them in a little while. I decided to focus on because I was getting spread pretty thin with the animal charities. I worked with them. I worked with the Beagle Freedom Project for a while there, and Farm Sanctuary was another one. And my wife and I realized that we could do probably lend most of our attention to a local charity in my wife's hometown called Stray Rescue of St. Louis. So
Stray Rescue of St. Louis. Okay, because I put the Best Friends Animal Society link in the description, but I'll also put Best Friends of St. Louis in there.
Well, it's Stray Rescue of St. Louis.
Stray Rescue of St. Louis. Okay, I'll get that up into the description when we're done.
Yeah, thank you. And they do really amazing work. It was started by a friend of mine now, a guy named Randy Grimm, who is just amazing with bringing in these abused animals. And he has such a way. It's really magic the way he can get an animal that's in not the best situation and get them to trust him and bring them in and take care of them and rehabilitate them. So it was just a cool group and doing something good for my wife's hometown and lending our attention to that. So, yeah.
Oh, we got another question from this busybody here.
Questions. I like questions.
Here. You can see that, right?
Yeah, I'll read it. If you were offered a choice of theater roles now, would you prefer a Mamet type role where every word and inflection must be done true to script every night? Or would you like to do True West and alternate leads every night? Oh, like the True West thing that they did a few years ago. Geez, there's such a, I don't know. I think being locked into a certain kind of role and a certain way of doing the role that is required by David Mamet's work is tricky and can really feel like you're put in a box in some ways. And I'm kind of all about freedom and it never feeling the same way twice. I can become, I know my traps as an actor are being this kind of thinking kind of actor and realizing that the best thing for me is not repeating something to try to get the same result because I'll do it very well and then it'll lose all life inside of it. And that's the tricky part. So I always force myself to approach every take with some freedom that like, let's see what else happens this time. Maybe, and then maybe something will surprise me. And remembering that that's part of the art. Of course, I know those people that are theater purists, that are theater actor purists and old school thinkers about theater. Things you must land on certain marks and find your light and have the same way and not surprise people. Yes, of course. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about approaching each scene fresh and finding a way to fresh mint these words that come out of your mouth so that we don't take it for granted that we're experiencing these things for the first time. That is the challenge. And that's what Stanislavski said as well. An actor lives everything twice, once in memory and once in doing. And that's the challenge of that as an actor. And we forget this because we sort of say, well, I'm just going to do the same thing. It's just a matinee. I'm just going to repeat myself. So knowing that I have that tendency, probably I would drift more to the Sam Shepard type thing and sort of saying like, let's see what else can happen tonight. Cause my God, I don't know what's going to come out of me.
Yeah.
And that's the fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that's a great note to end on. It has been great to have you here and chat about life and art. And those of you watching, thank you for joining us. And I want to remind you to subscribe to this show and make sure to click the bell icon so you get notifications of the upcoming live streams. And don't forget to tune in on Wednesday evenings at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific, when my brothers, Adam and Anthony, and I do our show, The Arkin Brothers Talk About Movies. This Wednesday, we're talking about Harper with the wonderful, some other actor with blue eyes, some other handsome guy with blue eyes, Paul Newman. So thanks so much, Seamus. This has just been really great having you here.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for having your patience and listening to me.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Good night.